Hey guys, what's going on? It's Chris here from Bulldog Models. In today's video we are going to be building the Meng Sherman Toon tank. Now I've actually built this as a group build entry. It's not fully finished yet, I've still got to do the tracks and I'm making a little diorama base for it. The group build event starts on the 1st of April, which funnily enough is today. It's over on the Scale Model Maniacs Facebook group, so I'm going to drop a link down in the description below. So if you guys want to get involved, jump on over and come and have a look. With this video I decided to film it with a little bit of fun. So the construction of this video, with this tank, I've actually done in a stop motion style. But there was no chance in hell that I was going to be painting this as a stop motion. So I hope you guys enjoy it. I am going to go into the weathering. Some of the weathering process was lost, but I'm going to show you that on a separate tank because the process is exactly the same. So without further delay, let's get on with the main video. So now the base construction is complete, it's time to get it into the primer coat. There's a little bit of cleanup still needing to be done on this, but I'm going to put it in primer, see how it looks. If there's anything that I need to touch up at that point, that's when I'm going to actually attack it and change it. But as a whole, it looks pretty good so far. So what I'm going to use now is my MIG one-shot black primer. And I'm going to fill up my Air Cobra air gun by MIG Ammo. And we're going to be spraying at 20 psi. So when it comes down to using MIG Ammo paints, my biggest advice is apply them in very thin layers, almost like a dust coat to break the surface tension of the plastic, and then build it up over a couple more layers after that. So as you can see on this, I keep going over the same areas. It's because the coat is very, very fine, and I'm trying to build it up gradually. So primer's all nicely down now. Now it's time to start on the base coat. So for this I'm using MIG Ammo's Olive Drab Base. And we're going to do exactly the same technique again. We're going to apply it in very thin coats and we're going to build it up so we've got a nice even base coat all over the model. Oh yeah, that's the base coat done and dusted. Now I'm going to use some Meng olive drab highlights. We only need a little bit of this paint because we only had to pick up certain high panels or high parts of the vehicle. So I'm going to start and just go around the turret a little bit, add some kind of natural weathering, natural highlights to the paint, as if it's worn, maybe a bit sun bleached, or where the crew have been sort of clambering over, or just maybe where the sun's hitting the vehicle in general. You really don't need much paint for this, and do it very, very sparingly. It's a great technique for adding a bit of depth to your paint. So as you can see, once the highlighting is complete, it adds this almost cartoony look to this particular model as well. The next stage is to apply some camouflage, but before I do that I would like to chip the camouflage up, so I'm going to use some of the heavy chipping fluid. Now at the time of making this video I did not realise I picked up my AK fluid. I was meant to pick up the Meng brand fluid instead because it works better with their paints. The principle for using this, however, is put a little bit in your air gun and you're going to apply very light mist coats of it to the vehicle. You can use your air gun in order to dry it off between coats, but ideally you want to put down 3 to 4 coats. It depends how heavy you would like this vehicle or your paint on top of it to chip. So I didn't want anything too heavy, so I applied 3 coats in this instance. So once I'd got down a couple of coats and I was happy with it, the excess that was in my air gun, you can just pour it straight back into the bottle. There's absolutely no problems there, and that way you've got more to use in the future. Now I'm going to use some of Meng masking putty. I've never used this product before up until making this video. It's quite a odd product to use, but it worked incredibly well. All you need to do, it's a little bit like blue tack, is you rip a little, chunk off, work it between your fingers for a while to warm it through and to make it a bit more easy to work with. And then I ripped off little sections of it, stretched it out in the shape of camouflage, and laid it over my model. Once I'd got the shapes that I wanted, I then grabbed my Meng matte black, loaded it into my air gun, and just very carefully sprayed in the areas that I'd masked off for the camouflage pattern. Okay, some moments of truth. We've never used this product before, I wasn't sure how it was going to work. I'm not worried about the overspray on the underside of the turret because it'll never be seen. But I very, very carefully peeled the masking off from the model, trying not to pull any parts off or break anything. And I was very pleasantly surprised with the results. Now bearing in mind some of the edges are a little bit hard, but obviously, as I said, we're going to be chipping this up and changing it. But I was quite happy with the outcome, and considering it's the first time I'd ever used it, I was very impressed with the product. The lovely thing about the masking putty is you can put it all back together, put it back in the tin, and it is reusable. I'm now going to repeat the process for the main hull of the tank. What I did here was just popped my turret back on, just so I could roughly line up the camo patterns so that it didn't look too odd once the model was actually assembled. And there we have it. We have the final camouflage pattern applied. Didn't come out quite as I wanted it, but considering I was going to chip it all up, I wasn't too worried at this stage. And by the time we get weathering and things on there, you're not really going to notice the black. I know it looks a little bit stark at the moment, but wait to see how we transform it over the coming sections. So the moment of truth then, does the chipping fluid work? So all I've got here is just a glass of regular water, tap water, and a rounded paintbrush. And all I do is moisten down the surface a little bit and then start quite gently rubbing back and forth in order to start chipping up the black paint that we applied. Now you don't want to wait too long between trying to chip it from applying the chipping fluid. You only have a limited period of time to work. I personally don't like to leave it any longer than about half an hour. And as you can see now, big chunks of the paint are starting to come off, but we did use the heavy chipping fluid, so a big section of it will. But this is what I was talking about the reaction between the MIG Ammo and the AK product. I've used the MIG Ammo stuff before and it chipped a lot easier than this. This was quite stubborn. So there was a couple of areas where I concentrated on more, trying to take as much of the edges out as I could as I went. It was at this point I'd noticed a skin kind of texture had formed from the chipping fluid. So what I started doing then was wetting down the rest of the paint where I didn't want it and just wiping it off. You can actually see the colour difference once I've done that. As I progress around the model, I do end up taking a lot of the chipping fluid off just to make sure it's not sat on the surface anymore and it's not going to affect further weathering steps down the line. So with a bit of work, I managed to get the chipping all done. One of my favourite steps of any build is actually applying the decals to the vehicle. I feel like it really makes the vehicle come to life once it's got its decals and it starts to look really, really good. So these are just simple water slide decals. I've got a little bath of warm water there. I'm going to drop the decal sheet in, let it soak up just for a minute or so, and then I'm going to go around the vehicle and apply the decals where they are needed. Another first for me on this one was using the decal set and fix. Now as it was, I actually only used the decal fix in the end. Basically what you do is you get your decals in place and then you give it a couple of coats of the decal fix and it helps to seal them properly to the vehicle and make sure they adhere to the shape. So here's how all the vehicle looks with the decals applied. Now what I've done at this stage, I've gone over all of the decals with Decal Fix, and that just makes sure, like I said, they're all stuck down to the vehicle correctly. It helps them contour to the vehicle, and it just, you know, gives them a really nice base for continuing to work. So what I'm going to do at this stage, before we seal it all up with varnish, I'm going to use some of Meng old wood colour, and we're going to put a few drops just into a paint tray, and we're going to paint in the tools on the vehicle. On this vehicle there's only a couple of shovels that we need to paint in, so we're going to get the wooden handles of them painted now. For this I'm just going to use a fine brush and hand paint the tools in. There's no point in masking and trying to spray them. It's a very, very small amount of paint. It's a very, very quick job to do. Now I'm just going to take some more of our Meng black, matte black paint, paint in the gun barrel on the hull, and paint the wheels as well to represent the tyres. Now all of the tools and wheels are painted, we're going to take our satin Lucky Varnish by Meng. Give this a really good shake before you apply it to the vehicle, and use the same technique as applying the paint. Do it in light coats. However, wait at least 5 minutes between each coat. I believe I give this vehicle 3 coats altogether. Okay, it's been 24 hours since I applied my varnish coat. I'll allow 24 hours to let it harden up and dry fully. I've got a really nice smooth texture on my turret and on the main hull of the vehicle. There's no orange peel texture or anything like that. It's lovely and smooth. And what this has done now is sealed in all the hard work we've done so far and preparing it for the next stages. We're now going to switch to an enamel filter. So all this is, it's very thinned down enamel product, and it's a green colour, and what it's going to do is, as I apply it to the vehicle, it's going to start varying the tone of that camouflage that we've already laid down and the highlights. It kind of brings it all together, but also adds its own unique high and low lights to the vehicle. It's a really, really nice product. What I tend to do on this one is give it 2 to 3 coats depending on how it's looking, and then this product also has to dry for 24 hours before we go any further with it. Another quick tip for you guys with these filters: after a few minutes of using it, pop the lid back on and give it another good shake and then carry on. What it is the pigments in the liquid seem to settle towards the bottom of the bottle, so if you give it a shake up, you seem to get all these different turns as you progress through. If you left it for too long, all you're going to get there is the suspension fluid, and it's not really going to do anything for your vehicle. The other thing I forgot to say is I'm trying to avoid getting this on my tools because I didn't want it on the wood at this point. Okay, so our filters had 24 hours to harden up, and you can see the tone it's created on the vehicle. Next, we're going to do some panel line washes using Meng Dark Wash. These are really, really simple products to use, but they add a lot of interesting visual effects. With this being a cartoony sort of tank, I wanted to go a little bit darker than normal, so I've gone for the really dark wash. You're going to need yourself a really fine paintbrush, and you're just going to get a little bit of the product on the brush and start to go around things like rivets, any high points, or any areas where dirt would naturally collect within the vehicle. As you'll see there, I've just actually caught my tank and put a line down of this wash. Don't worry about that. What we'll do in the next stage is we're going to come back with some enamel thinner, and we're going to remove all of the excess, and we'll correct any mistakes we've made along the way. So I've now let my panel liner dry up for about an hour, and we're going to get some Meng odorless thinner, and we're going to go around the vehicle, and all of the excess from the wash that we've got, we're going to use it on a brush and just clean up some of that excess just by rubbing it away. Okay, so next up I wanted to add a little bit more highlights into the vehicle. So I grabbed my Meng oil brushes, and I've got the olive green and the dust colour, and just a lid off a takeaway tub just to mix it in. And what I'm going to do is just put equal amounts of both of the colours onto the tray. And then we're going to mix them together and apply them just to a couple of little patches on the vehicle. They look really stark at first, but what we're going to do is once they've dried up a little bit, we're going to bring in the enamel thinners again, and we're going to start to blend it into the paint of the vehicle. By the time we've finished with further weathering steps, this step isn't going to stand out as much as what it appears to do in the video. So just like before when we added the highlights to the paintwork, I'm just going to pick out a couple of little high spots. So just around the top of the turret, on the access doors for the commander's cupola. I'm also just going to go across the top of the gun barrel and the very top of the gun mantlet as well. Okay, so now what we need to do, now this has dried up for a few moments, is bring back our odorless enamel thinner. We're going to put a little bit on the brush and just take off some of the excess so we're not, drowning the surface. And what we're going to do is gradually blend out these oil marks. And now a lot of it will come away pretty quickly. It's getting the consistency right of the amount of enamel on the brush to the surface of the vehicle. This step you can skip if you don't want to do it. It's not necessary. I just like to add it just for a little bit of extra dimension to my paint. Okay, so now we've got that step done, I'm going to take my Meng Old Rust and my takeaway tub lid again. We're going to use this colour to provide chipping on the vehicle. So we don't need much paint, just a couple of blobs, and I'm going to get a old kitchen sponge. Well, this one's a new one obviously. I'm going to rip off a tiny bit of the sponge and rough it up a little bit by taking some sections out just to create a different pattern in the sponge surface. Once we've done this, I'm just going to get it between my tweezers just to make it easier to manage so I'm not getting paint all over my fingers and don't accidentally touch the vehicle and transfer a fingerprint onto it or anything like that. And then all you're going to do is get a little bit on the sponge and dab off the excess on your kitchen roll. And then we're going to look around the vehicle for the high usage areas where the crew would clamber up, or where the hatches would get chipping and wear on them from being opened and closed. Areas like that of interest. We don't want to cover the whole vehicle. This technique is very, very easy to overdo. For now, it's always better to add less to begin with. You can always go back and add a little bit more at a later stage. Also, while you're doing this, don't forget to go over the decals as well. Obviously, the decals were paint on a vehicle, and this area of the vehicle would also get chipped back maybe to base coat. Maybe not so much, I just tend to put a couple of light little chips on it, but nothing too excessive. One other little tip I like to do at this stage is taking my very fine paintbrush and taking off some of the excess, is I'm just going to go around the turret and add a couple of little scratches. I tend to put these in areas where stowage might be attached to the vehicle, or the crew are dragging equipment up. Don't overdo it, it's a simple technique. A couple of little scratches here and there, it adds a lot of depth to the tank. Okay, so now that we're done with the chipping on the vehicle, we need to pay some attention to the tools. A really simple technique that I like to get a wood texture is to take Meng oil brusher, and it's the dark brown, and we're just going to apply some little blobs of it to the wooden handle of the tool. So here we really don't need a lot. I tend to just put it either side of the tool clasp or where the handle joins the main tool itself. And once that's applied, put it on all the tools, leave it to dry up for 5 to 10 minutes or so. After you've let it dry for 10 minutes or so, grab your enamel odorless thinner again, and we're going to take our paintbrush, clean off most of the excess, and we're just going to stretch the oil across the whole of the handle. We don't want to take too much of it off. We want a nice little coating of the oil, but so it's a bit patchy as well, like wood grain. After you've gone around all the tools and took off a lot of the excess, we're now going to use one of these sniper brushes. So all it is, a cotton swab would do exactly the same thing. But you dip it in your odorless enamel thinner, take off as much of the excess as you can, just so it's, only slightly damp, and brush it along the tool. What this tends to do is it leaves lines in the paints, or in the oil should I say, and this almost creates the wood grain texture that we're looking for. It's a really nice, simple way of achieving wood grain. Okay, streaking grime time. So I'm going to use some oil brusher Starship Filth. And all we're going to do with this, take off some of the excess so there's not much on the little applicator brush. And I'm going to apply this to high spots on the vehicle, normally where silt and rain and everything would actually run down the vehicle. So I apply it under details like rivets or any sort of recesses where dirt and grime would build up and then run out as it rains. I'm going to emphasise the technique a little bit more with the style of tank we're doing, with it being quite cartoony. But if you was applying it to a regular Sherman build, then just take off more of the Starship Filth than I do in this particular clip. So what I actually use here is one of these streaking style brushes, where it's not a solid tip, it's got, you know, different tiers in it. You're going to take your thinner once more. Dampen the brush and take off some of the excess. We don't want absolutely loads, otherwise it's just going to take that starship filth clean off. You'll notice I haven't actually let the starship filth dry. And then we're going to follow the motion that rain would take down a vehicle. So we're just going to start streaking down all of these different filth spots that we've created. The nice thing with this technique is you can go quite lightly, let it dry. If you don't like it, go back with your thinner and your brush again and take a little bit more off until you achieve your desired effect. And as you can see here, once you've done it properly, you get a really nice streaking grime effect over the vehicle. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go around the rest of the vehicle, taking up natural spots where the weather would affect the vehicle, and keep applying this technique. So unfortunately, it was after this point that I lost the next stages of the weathering. I carried on going around the vehicle. I remembered to add some chip into the suspension and the wheels, and then I carried on going around the vehicle with the starship filth and streaking that off. After this point, I let that harden up for 24 hours again, and then using varying dust pigments of different colours. It doesn't really matter which company you use for this one. I happen to use the Meng. But you apply the dust layers, use varying shades, you know, mix up the different earth colours, apply them around the wheels and around any areas of the vehicle where the actual mud and dust would gather naturally. I set this in place with just a little bit of enamel thinners again. Just put a little drop into the pigments, let it spread and dry out overnight, and then if you feel there's too much on, you can just brush the excess off. Finally, I went around with some dried mud and wet mud, and I flicked it over the vehicle and applied it all around the suspension and the underside of the vehicle to create a realistic kind of mud texture. But with it being a cartoony tank, I've gone a little bit over the top with it. What I'll do, because this video is already getting pretty lengthy, I'll put a separate video up on the dust and mud techniques. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave me a comment down below. Hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell so you'll be able to see when I drop my next video. Thanks for stopping by, guys.